welcome everybody to this episode of Buried Pleasures. Hi, I'm your hostess, PollyAnnamazing. And today, what shivers your timbers? We have my wonderful friend Robert that's going to be talking to us in a little bit about some really cool things that he's involved with leather and the fetish community and the wonderful brilliance that he is. So you can find me, PollyAnnamazing, at berrypleasures.com, Berry Pleasures on Twitter, and Pleasure Pathways on Facebook and Instagram. Robert, welcome. How are you, sir?
I'm good. A
Man,
little crazy, but always good.
always good. Well, Robert, please tell the folks out there listening where they can find you.
So I have a new company that has just started. So it's called Royal Creation Leather, no S between the creation and leather. And it's Royal Creation Leather at Gmail. It will be Royal Creation Leather at Facebook, Instagram. So it's a little bit of everywhere. And then the website is starting, should be up in a week or two, and hopefully it will be Royal Creation Leather. But we'll see what I actually get. But last time I checked, that was still available as a domain.
Fantastic, Robert. So, a little backstory between Robert and myself. Robert was my partner in our clinical trials when we were in nurse practitioner school. So, we've known each other for quite a while and we do keep in contact, here and there. So, what's my most and favorite impression and lovely story about Robert is I'm telling you guys, I walk into a room full of nursing students, NP students, that's who we are. And I'm pretty sure that as my norm, I picked out the only man that was homosexual, which I truly do. Not that honestly, I never thought in the million years when I first sat down to talk to Robert that that was even a thing. But for whatever reason, the universe connects me with the most brilliant and amazing people. So, Robert, we had such a good time at that point. 2 days in Chicago trying to schlep through some head to toe assessments and
Mhm.
freaking out over all the assignments and everything. But we got through it and we are both practicing wonderfully in our respective communities. And now that you've started doing this great job as a nurse practitioner, and you're no longer in the Chicago area, right? You're in Texas.
Yeah, I moved to Houston a little over 2 years ago, but
Yeah.
I lived in Chicago for 17 years.
Oh
So
wow. Yeah,
yeah, I was there for
forever.
quite a while.
And where are you from originally?
Kentucky.
Of
But
course
I
you are. We're
but I
all
haven't
looking
I,
for.
I haven't lived there since '99. So I traveled for nursing for a while, ended up in
Mhm.
Chicago, fell in love there, and loved the community and loved it had a very big city feel, but more Midwest mentality.
Yeah.
Compared to like I'd lived in San Francisco for a little while and a little too crowded for me.
Hmm.
So it got the best of both for me.
That is awesome. So, Robert, let's talk about, well, let's start at the beginning. Where are you were from Kentucky? Tell me a little bit about how in the world you got from Kentucky to where you are now.
So I had some medical stuff when I was a kid and say surgeries and stuff, and I'd always been interested in the medical field. So going through high school, I started, we had to start figuring out what we were going to do, and I knew college was probably not an option for me because I wasn't focused enough for it, and I didn't want to. So I went to technical school
Okay.
and started out as what's called a surgical tech, where you do 10 months of education, and you're the person in surgery that passes instruments to the surgeon. You set up the sterile field, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And I knew I didn't want to stay. And I was raised in Lexington, which is the second biggest city, so it was
Yeah.
metropolitan-ish college town. But I wanted to see the world, so I went and became a traveling tech. At that point, went with my boyfriend at the time, and then we traveled all over the place. I've been to Allentown, Pennsylvania, Ocala, Florida, Cincinnati, Colorado Springs, San Francisco, Minneapolis, and Chicago. And I went to Chicago for my first leather event and fell in love with it and knew that's where I wanted to end up. And so I stopped, went back to school for nursing, and I did that in Chicago. So
Nice, 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 nice. So, what brought you from, okay, I'm a nurse practitioner, I'm moving to Houston, and now I'm gonna make awesome leather accessories? What happened in between there?
so I had always been well, being into BDSM and the leather community and
Oh,
seeing
hang
that.
on for everybody out there who doesn't know what BDSM is.
Oh,
Can you please elaborate?
it's uh, it's bondage, discipline, sadomasochism. So it's a broad term for any type of non, in a way, missionary sexual aspect. So
Gotcha.
missionary is just on top of each other, no
Yeah.
other aspect.
Non-traditional. We got it. Yeah.
Right. So it's anything that would be considered not in the normal spectrum of a basic mentality of sexual activity.
Okay.
Um, and so I had always been interested and I got into sewing. So when I got married, which I'm divorced now, we gave each of the people who were in the wedding a lap quilt,
Uh-huh.
and I learned how to sew with that and learned from there, and then moved to learning more and more. And then I moved here and wanted some outlets because I moved here to be with my two boyfriends at the time. We're no
Mhm.
longer together, but wanted aspects of learning new things. And I started going to the Renaissance Fair, which the one here in Houston is the largest in the country, and it runs the longest. It was 9 weeks, now it's 8, and just really fell in love with what was there and the armor. And I've always been a big geek. So like, I played D&D and I was a gamer for a long time. And so it kind of just melded into this. And then with COVID happening and figuring out, okay, healthcare is, as long as I've got my license, I got a job, but I'm also 43. And I'm like, what do I want to do with the rest of my life?
Right.
And healthcare, while I love it, I've been in it now for 25 years.
Yeah.
So I'm looking, I started looking at, people were saying, hey, this is really great. You should sell it. You should make more. And getting that feedback really pushed me to say, what, maybe I can look into starting this as a business and see where it goes.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have the misconception that once a nurse practitioner, once a nurse, once a doctor, always that. But there's a lot of things out there in life other than taking care of other people, and we have to have our own little niches for self pleasure. Like we need to be able to come home and put, that nurse practitioner hat
Mhm.
aside. And for you, it looks like a leather helmet. For me, it's some other things. I love that fact. But we were talking before this show, there were some things that may have led you down this path. Um, and who are the people that have been helping you to develop your skills? How did you even learn how to sew, for that matter?
So a lot of it is I one of the big pushes, not so much people, but a lot of the leather companies, and I understand why they have this philosophy or this like aspect. They don't really cater to the non-small, skinny, or muscular forms. When it comes to bigger forms like bears, which are gay men generally who have weight, usually have fur on their chest.
Hmm.
If you're not that quintessential skinnier person or muscular person, it's hard to get stuff that fits you, even like bigger females, or you know it it it's a defect for me in the way that the community as a whole has left some people out. It is starting to change,
Hmm.
but it's still a problem because most people can't keep a bunch of stuff that's bigger because that's a stock that they have to hold on till somebody comes over who can buy it.
Right, right.
So it's that being into I tend to be more attracted to bigger guys, like
Mhm.
bigger muscular guys with weight. that's a general rule. And, when I see a guy that fits that mentality and I'm looking at him and I'm in my mind, I'm like, oh, he would look really hot in this type of leather or this, thinking, okay, what's appealing to me,
Right.
and some of them, some people are not like comfortable with that, but some people, you'll run into them, they're like, yeah, well, I would love to have a harness or this or that. And they're like, but I can't find one that fits me.
Right. And and that's I feel you on that because as a larger lady, I'm not a skinny little girl. Um I can probably maybe 1,000 times have I ever purchased something, because when you're a bigger person, you do have to go to specialty shops or online for sure. So you don't have the capability to try things on. And so I probably have had 1,000 bras that never fit, but they
Hmm.
looked really damn cute on the size zero model that was modeling it.
Right.
But and again, we have to understand that. But on average, people are not that small size anymore. That used to be the norm. Now it is not. And I do a whole series on health at every size. I think it's a really interesting thing to talk about. But that in itself is a big determinant for people, I think, because you want to look, you see all these things going on, and you dive into these groups. Maybe if you got on a Facebook group about BDSM, or this really, you've met some people and you want to learn more, you kind of feel like, oh, well, I don't have the body type to, nobody's going to think I'm attractive. But just like you said, you're attracted to bigger guys. I'm not attracted to tiny men either, Um, there are some differences about that, and it's
Right.
really cool that you recognize that, and then you're trying to do something about it. But let's talk about that dress form behind you. That's, that's my favorite thing that we've talked about. How
Yeah.
did that come about?
So the dress form was, there's a guy that I watch on YouTube, great way he does different things, and he teaches people how to, and he's kind of not the most skilled, but he's learning.
Right. So
So the
you can
way,
plug him if you want to, because let's plug him. He's good to
so
read.
his name is his YouTube channel is called Skill Tree, and he does everything from leather working to making wands to making a wand with fire. I mean, he does all kinds of stuff. But he's a big
Awesome.
dude too, right? So this is basically one of the reasons I needed a dress form. I needed something that I can use to plot things out, and leather is not the most. It's not the easiest thing to work with
Yeah.
you, and unlike other material, you put a hole in leather, it's there forever, you can't fix it. You
Right.
can cover it, you can try to do something with it, but it's unforgiving in that way.
Hmm.
So I needed something because of me focusing not beyond just the small muscular guys but bigger people too, is something that's bigger. So this is me, this is actually me, quick, easy. You just painter suit, tape someone, duct tape me in it all the way through, cut it out, and then I got this expandable foam stuff, put it in there, and it is actually setting on an IV pole. So it's great. It's a little top heavy. Like I could use something to keep it weight down, but for what I need now, it's fine.
That's so
So
awesome. And the things that are on it right now, to describe it, can you describe it? Because obviously some people will not be watching, some people will be listening. Can you
so
describe what you have going on there?
So this is one of my barbarian sets. So like I had talked about going to the Renaissance Fair here each week, which each weekend is kind of a focused weekend. So weekend one is Oktoberfest. So I have a pair of lederhosens. I wear that, go out, drink beer all day long. But Barbarian weekend, which is a lot of fun. It's just, and the one thing about, being a gay man in Texas,
Mhm.
even though it is Houston, you're always a little concerned because I went from Chicago, a very blue liberal
Right.
area, to being in Houston, which Houston itself is liberal, not quite on the same level, but liberal.
Right.
You're a little concerned, am I going to be dealing with getting my butt kicked or whatever? But going to the Renaissance Fair, it's one of the most welcoming environments I've ever been to. Like you'll see guys like they'll be wearing little to nothing. They're as straight as they can be. And they know people are looking at them because they're looking at the armor or their bodies or whatever. And it's one of the most welcoming places I've ever been.
That's
And people just don't care. Like
Yeah.
they're just to have a good time. So this is my Barbarian Bear piece. So it has a side shoulder piece that straps under with a groin area that has some tooling and some designs, and then it has wrist piece plus a helmet that is in the shape of a bear.
I
So
love
it's,
it.
yeah, it's I was very proud of this piece.
I'm very proud for you. It's gorgeous. So the bear helmet, is that a toss back to bears themselves? Is that what?
Well, because with barbarian, you think barbarian, Vikings,
Yeah.
you know, bigger guys
Yeah.
for like,
Love it.
they're gonna ravage. I mean, in
It's
a very,
clever. It's
yeah,
clever. Ravaging. I like
yeah.
it. Now, I know you mentioned before, and we'll just roll back to that just a second, but um, going out and being afraid, you're a good size guy. You're formidable size. I
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say being afraid, just being more conscious about my surroundings,
but
especially in the environment of being in Texas, which is very, very conservative,
yeah.
can be very intimidating, going from where I was to where I'm at. And granted, being back from Kentucky, but I
Yeah.
was still in the city, but still there's some mentalities you have to work through. And I haven't really had any problems, but you go into an unknown situation and you're like, okay, what's this going to end up being?
Right. Right. Well, I think what you're saying, you're echoing some of the fears that females have. You don't normally hear men say that, like straight cisgendered male are
Right,
not going to say, I'm afraid to walk into a bar because somebody's going to beat me up. That doesn't usually happen.
right,
Now, in the environment that surround myself with, I have friends of color, friends that are, different sexuality preferences, gender types, whatever you want to call it, that are that say the same thing you do. You just have to be cautious. And isn't that a weird and strange thing that we're all feeling the same way, but we can't communicate it to each other in an open environment because of the fear? And I think what you were saying with your community at the Ren Fair,
right.
that they're accepting of you, and so it makes it comfortable. That's why it's how many weeks long? Like forever long,
It's
right?
it used to be 9, so it used to go from the very first weekend in October until Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah.
So and I usually go at least 2 or 3 weekends out of the events, and it's just, it's humongous. Like you
Right.
can literally spend the entire day. And I go there because there's people I know, and I've been going for a couple of years now, but there's people who've been going since they were kids.
Right.
Like they've been going every year because it's a way to just like go. You can be as weird as you want and still be welcomed. So it's one of those things. It's a way to get away from reality into
Mhm.
an environment that you love being around.
Right. And it feels like you're safe there. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
I love that thought. There are so many times that I myself personally have felt like we just do each other a disservice, right? Disjustice in the fact that you have that feeling 8 weeks out of the year, you know? And that
Mhm.
kind of sucks. Why can't we just have Ren Fair every day?
Well, my wallet would not be able to survive, because yeah, I love going and I drink a lot of beer, and tend to buy more weapons. And my other half, who one of my boyfriends who lives with me, would kill me because he's already ready to kill me because I have an entire floor for my stuff, and I have like several pieces of weapons that I need to make pieces so I can hang them up on the wall. It's been low on the options I need to do right now.
That's awesome. Well, let's move into what you were just talking about, your boyfriends. How's
Mhm.
that happen? Dag nabbit. I'm not
Well,
jealous that you have two men. I mean, geez.
so I've never been averse to or want monogamy. I don't. For me, I don't believe it's an option. I just, and it's not. Some people come back and they're like, "Well, you're cheating." I'm like, "No, no, no, no. There's no cheating. There's direct communication and understanding of saying, okay, I love you as a person. I want to be with you, but because of my desires of different aspects, BDSM or certain things, there are things that you don't like doing that I want to do or want done to me, and you're not experienced enough to do it in a safe manner. Because whenever it comes to BDSM or that kind of stuff, safety has got to be first and foremost, and communication.
Yeah.
So the my boyfriend, he's quite sort of a boy. He's there are times when I'm the dom and he's the sub, um, in certain aspects, and there are certain things that he likes doing to him, and so we started dating. So we met, we hung out for about 2 months. We were like, we're not going to say we're dating. We want to see if this is going to work out, because we've both had issues in the past where we jump into a relationship and it ends up not being a great relationship. And so we were even though everybody was like, no, y'all are dating, you're together, you're always hanging out. And I'm like, no, but I mean, it was about 2 months, and then we officially started dating. And then we waited a couple of weeks before we started telling people, because we were like, let's see if this works. So we're just very conscious. And then we've been together about a year and a couple of months. December 8th is when we started dating, 2 Decembers ago. And then we met this other guy, and he's what's called a pup. And I'll go into that a little
Yeah,
bit.
we'll talk about that next.
So he and the boy
Mhm.
really hit it off. They played a couple of times, and I I always said I was never a jealous person. My last relationship brought out a lot of insecurity, jealousies in me, and this relationship, not at all. In general, I mean, there's always some jealousies, and you always have to be able to talk about it. But he was hooking up with this guy a couple of times. I saw what was developing, and I kind of was like, okay, what's going on? We talked about it. They started doing their thing and started dating, and then we things started developing between me and the third guy. And so now we've recently started this whole thruple or triad. There's multiple different names, but we're all dating each other. But in that, there are 4 relationships. So there's mine and the boy's relationship, there's mine and the pup's relationship, there's the boy and the pup's relationship, and then there's the relationship as a whole. So communication is the most important thing. The more people, the more communication there has.
Right.
The moment you start feeling jealous or you're not secure, you have to be able to speak up, and you have to be able to do it where people don't um, degrade you or belittle what you're feeling. Because if you're feeling it, you need to speak up and get that. Because if you don't, it's just going to breed a lot of issues.
Right. So I'm going to ask you this: as a child, who taught you how to be that open and honest? Because I don't think
Um,
I was taught that as a child. Now,
um,
again, it's the jealousy thing. I think that, or maybe the lack of communication and the fact that your parents don't really talk to you about that kind of thing at all, or mine didn't. But tell
well,
me about
I
yours.
mean, my mom was always very open. She always wanted, I mean, my mom as a kid and teenager, I mean, she was always my mother. Like, she had the authority over me, but she was always very like, I want you to talk to me. If you have issues, I want you to talk to me. She's like, I want to know what's going on, because if I don't, I can't either support you or be helpful or whatever. So my mom was always like that. But to be honest, my last relationship, I had a lot of issues happen on both parts. So it's not
Right.
my fault, not their fault, a lot of issues. But I had a lot of therapy.
Mhm.
And the therapist I found was someone who was in the leather BDSM community.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of that was, he understood the dynamics, he understood the base terminology. So it wasn't spending the first couple of sessions being like, hey, what's this? What's this? So learning how to manage my anxiety and understanding what's going on and being able to speak up and say, okay, and do it in a productive way and not a accusatory or something like that. And the relationship I have with uh, my boy is one of the best. It's probably one of the best relationships I've ever had, because we actually had our first disagreement argument after being together for a year and 3-4 months the other week. And it was like, it was over something stupid, but it was like, we've never had a true argument. We've had discussions, but no
Yeah.
arguments.
Was it over a leather sewing machine? Just asking for friends.
No, no, he's really good. Like, he's gotten to the point, it was over, like, he wanted we had electricity problems. We were in the house for a couple of days because of all that.
Yeah.
But he wanted to get the dishes done, and it was like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And I had to work the next day. I'm like, why are we doing this now? I was off. You were off. We could have done this earlier. And so, but and no, he's gotten to the point. He's like, don't tell me what you're spending. He's like, I'll tell him what I'm getting, like if I'm
Yeah.
buying stuff, like whatever. But he's like, I don't know what you're spending because my money's my money, his money's his money, and then we have the money for the joints. So
House stuff.
joint
I got you.
situation.
I feel you on that one as well. That's fantastic. So let me ask you this, if you don't mind. Do you mind telling me when you came out or when your mom knew? Did your mom?
Oh, I came out when I was 18, right after high school. I
Okay.
mean, granted, this was like mid-ish, late 90s, so 97, because I graduated in 96. Well, 96. So this was 96. So this was still, I mean, this is what, almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, I'll tell you, 1996, my son will be 25 this year.
Yeah.
And that's right when I moved. I left Lexington at that time. So yeah.
Yeah, so I came out, and my mom she was pretty cool about it. She was just like, I love you. I have two uncles who are gay, so, and it's her brother, so it was one of those, like, it wasn't out of left field for her.
Sure. Sure.
But she was just like, as long as you're safe, and I want you, I just want you to be happy. So that was the biggest thing, and that's just, I mean, I've been out now for, I'm 43, so I've been out for, yeah, like 25, 26 years.
And how does that feel after being in high school and knowing that you weren't who most people thought you were? I'm sure that in your high school you weren't dating guys. Is that correct?
No, I wasn't dating. I didn't date anyone in high school.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, I just didn't look at it that way.
Yeah.
I was at that point where I was just me, and I was enjoying life and high school and friends. And back in the mid 90s, yeah, there was some areas and there were some things on TV, but it's definitely nothing like today.
Right.
Like my first character of remembering someone being gay on a show was like Melrose Place back in the early 90s.
Oh wow.
And he was only on for like 1 or 2 seasons, and he was like, there was no character development. There was like,
Right.
he dated someone but they never kissed. It was just, but it was the times.
Right. Right. Right.
Times are different now.
Right. And you can't be like I sit on the couch and my daughter will watch movies with us some nights and she says, oh, Mom, you can't say that stuff. What are they saying? Like watching movies from the 90s because she's just like, oh my God, Mom. And
Yeah,
heaven forbid you watch something from the early 80s or,
right.
70s. She thinks that that's the most crazy thing that I was brought up in that way, which
Mhm.
I am so happy to have had the influences, the positive influences that I've had in my life, because I definitely was not raised to be anything more than a judgmental Christian type person. And it's not my parents' fault. I'm not blaming them for that at all.
Mhm.
I love my parents very much. I miss my father terribly. And my poor little mama with her Alzheimer's, God love her heart. It's just tough to watch, but they did the best they could. And that's why I'm trying to do the best I can with my kids now, even though they're half grown. But it's just trying to find easy ways to get into topics just like we're talking today. Like it's the easiest and best thing to be able to communicate, just like you were saying earlier, that piece of communication. Like, how are people supposed to know about BDSM or leather guys or guys with big chains and locks? I want to talk about that.
Mhm.
All of those cool things that, unless you know somebody, how are you supposed to know? And then, I think once you know, you're less likely to be as judgmental as you would have been before.
Mhm.
And so that's why I think it's really great that you came on anyway in the first place. I appreciate you for that. But let's talk more about this whole alpha dom thing. I'm excited.
So I am considered a switch, meaning I can be a dom or I can be a sub, but I tend to categorize myself as an alpha, which is, um, you know, in BDSM in general, there's a philosophy. Doms are generally put in about three categories, which are like master, sir, and daddy,
Mhm.
or mommy, depending on whatever. And then in
So
subs,
let me ask you really quick. Sorry to interrupt you, but So when it comes to what your pronouns, is that how you get to be mommy, daddy, whatever, or how does
It's
that work?
more related to the person. Like there's these ideas of, master is this, and this, but that's an idea. It's whatever the person calls themselves
Gotcha.
to a point. Like, and then there, for subs, there are slave, boy, pup. You can even do as many as brat or other sub mentality or puppy.
Okay.
And so it's just different shades of the same situation. So, it's how you want to express yourself in an environment. And certain people fall with multiple areas. So just because you're a boy, which is very quick. So generally the mentality of like a master and slave go together. Masters in the old sense or old guard goes in, they have complete control. They're the ones who decides everything. The slave has no input, or if they do, it's behind closed doors and the master's in complete control. That's a general idea. And then
Right.
there's
Now, when you say slave, though, these are people who have opted to take that path,
correct,
not made
correct.
slaves or
No,
anything.
no, 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 no.
Right.
And everything is consensual and it has to be consensual. Now there are extreme situations,
Sure.
but when it comes to BDSM, everybody is consensual or should be consensual.
Right.
Now, outside situations is a different thing, but everything I talk about is consensual. Everybody has it's exchange of power. And it's most BDSM sexual acts or relationships or exchange of power. The sub or the submissive is giving up the power to the dom
Right.
and is giving it up freely.
Gotcha. I think what I'm trying to get at is while we're discussing this, people who don't know anything about BDSM or people who have a little knowledge, just enough to be dangerous. These are people who are in consensual relationships. These are
Correct.
not people who just get plucked off the street and you get told that you're the slave or whatever.
No, 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 no,
Not how that
exactly.
works, right? These are mutual
So
relationships.
yeah, and that's the thing is consent. And then there's daddy and boy is kind of derived out of slave a little bit. So boy is they're very you're submissive, but you have some ability to speak up and be part of decision making. And then daddy is more nurturing and like a dad or a daddy. And then there's pup and handler, which a pup is someone who is very a little bit more past what boy is in general, more affectionate and can be a little bit of a brat if they want to be stuff like that. So there's very different shades of the situation. But like, consent is one of the big thing that's really been coming out of the leather community in the last couple of years, in the respect that, certain people, they'll go into a bar and someone will go up and start touching another person and there's no consent. And the person either isn't ability, doesn't have the ability to say, I'm not comfortable with this, or doesn't, they're so, they may have had history of issues or like past issues where they can't speak up. So consent and inclusion in especially the gay leather community is something that's really becoming to the forefront now in the last couple of years.
Yeah. This is so interesting. And, while I'm sitting here, my knowledge on BDSM is basic at best, right?
Mhm.
But you bring up so many things. It's just what people choose to label themselves as, right? So I'm in a heteronormative marriage. Um, and that's comfortable for me. You are comfortable in this situation. So I want to encourage people out there that if you think that this might be something that you're interested in, do your research, figure out who is the go-to. That's what we do in nursing, I think, a lot too, is we,
Mhm.
we find that go-to person and then you ask them. It's not like you're going to ask a gynecologist about a cardiology question, right?
Right.
Not going to be, I mean, you could technically, but it's not their forte. So why not go to the source
Mhm.
and figure that out? So that's awesome. And so now you have these relationships now that you're in, and the boy lives with you, and you have another person that's in this
Who's
relationship.
who's a pup. So a pup. And if you look up online fetish or BDSM pups, they'll have a hood. Actually, I'll bring this down because I have one because I needed it to help create a design. But you know, I mean, it's a pup hood.
Oh, neat. So what we're looking at, if you're not watching currently, is it's a little leather dog face mask.
Well,
It's really
it's
cool.
neoprene, but same
Oh, is
thing.
it? Oh, is it neoprene? Okay.
Yeah, but it's their what's called headspace, or their ability to really be involved in that. And it's not, the thing is everything's not about sex. And I think
Right.
some people just think BDSM is like you're having sex and you're doing this, you're doing that. Some of it is just they need that, the way that they get that release of their stress and feeling comforted and secure and loved in certain aspect is they put this on and they are like a puppy. You treat them like a puppy, you pat them, you throw balls. It's an aspect of who they are that helps them through their sexual identity and who and what they want.
That's really awesome. Do you feel like in the people that you've met in the past, do you see some people traveling down the wrong path and you kind of intervene and have to say, "Hey, maybe this might not be for you. Maybe you should try something else," because you're recognizing as a professional, are you recognizing that some people are a little bit in danger?
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's just like being out at a bar and you finding someone to you want to go home with.
Right.
And I think, and I know that happens in the gay community. I know it happens
Oh,
in the
for sure.
straight. People want to get, they want to have sex or they want to get
People want to
their
get
environment.
laid. Yes. There's
So,
a lot of fuckery going on these days.
exactly. So being medically and where I'm at, like the last clinic I worked at was very open. Some people would come in and they're trying to explain some type of BDSM sexual act they did,
Right.
and they're not sure. And then I would, be like, okay, I understand this is what you were doing, or is this what you were doing? Okay, this is what we need to think about. Like if you're into certain sexual acts where you're putting larger things in the backside,
Mhm.
for a very these are the things you need to think about, along with younger people or young or newer people coming into the fetish community. Just like you were saying, go to the right person.
Right.
It's what's called vetting, you know asking around who is a safe playmate. Like, do they listen? Most people know about safe words. Your
Right.
safe word is when you say it and you're like, okay, what do they have it a known, is there a lot of talk about, okay, they're not the safest to play with, they didn't follow with what was set up? Because you always want to negotiate a scene, which is some type of scene, is like something going on that you've said, okay, I want this done to me, this person says I can do this to you. But for me, I be in the medical field, I'm like, do you have any allergies, any past like assault or anxiety? Because all that has to be understood, because while some things are very minor, and i am I tend to do or play in things that are much more high level that can be more dangerous. But I'm also experienced, I've been in BDSM now since for 20-ish years.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, it's just like, it's almost like a medical exam. Okay, what's your history? What do you need to, what do we need to do? Anything I need to know about, like, do you have allergies? Do you have asthma? Do you have anxiety?
Right.
Because if you don't, you can end up getting yourself or the person who maybe isn't asking the questions into a situation where it's like, okay, now you're calling an ambulance.
Right. Right. So that's kind of what I was getting at. Like in a I have counseled women, other women and men in my lifetime about their sexual activities. And when I'm when I see a perceived threat for them, I've been very verbal about it because that's just the kind of person I am.
Mhm.
And they expect it from me, obviously.
Right.
But in your like there are some things about fetish play that can be a little bit dangerous if not handled appropriately. If handled appropriately, can be beautiful and mutually a wonderful experience. But setting up boundaries is what I'm hearing you say is the with communication is huge.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. That's awesome. Yeah.
Along the same way, generally I follow the philosophy: no alcohol, no drugs during a scene.
Right.
Just because if you're the one in control, you need to be able to read the person, understand what's going on, communicate, where are you at? Are you okay? Da, 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 da. And if you're the one who is getting the stuff done to you, then you need to be able to speak up and say, no, I'm fine. I'm kind of on the edge, or no, we need to stop.
Okay.
And if you're on something, whether it's alcohol or whatever, it can dull your understanding of what's going on with your body to the point where you're like, it can interfere, and then you're having
Right.
problems.
Right. That's one of my previous guests, Brad Ballsy, I love you, by the way, was talking about how really using a lot of lidocaine products whenever we were talking about, introduction to anal, that maybe you should back off on that because it can cause some heart arrhythmias if you use it too much. And also,
Much.
if you're doing some things that hurt you that badly, maybe you should speak up and say, hey, this is not exactly um, my go-to thing here, and this is uncomfortable.
Right.
So I could imagine, there's so many avenues, but have you known any other people in your community, like in over the last 20 some years, that have really been beaten down by that drug scene, or that,
Oh
people have
yeah.
been really unsafe with?
Yeah, I mean, in the gay community specifically, meth is it's a very prominent aspect of gay culture, or
Yeah.
it can be. And part of that is people who do meth, or guys who do meth, they can do it and it keeps them up for multiple days in a row, and they can bottom. If bottoming is when you're receiving a penis or something in your
Hmm.
inside of you, they can bottom and go and go and go and go and go, and it's getting that feeling or that desire met, but it at a lot of cost.
Sure.
And
Sure.
I've lost probably 5 or 6, couple of fairly good friends, couple of playmates, and people I've known that they get into meth and they lose everything. And I don't, you always want to be supportive, but I have a general philosophy that there comes a point when you have to cut certain people out of your life if they're becoming destructive for themselves and can bring that destruction to you.
Right. And you don't need it. But you have set yourself up with your boundaries and your ability to communicate, to be able to say, hey, I appreciate you for who you are. And I am hoping that you get yourself together, and then we can maybe hang out again if you do. But if you don't, then I'm sorry, you're out.
Right.
And that's self-preservation. And I think a lot of times we don't necessarily do that for the sake of, like, just being nice. Basically, you don't want to be rude to people, but also you don't need that in your life at all.
Yeah,
Not
the hardest thing with therapy and everything was being selfish,
Yeah.
learning to be selfish for yourself,
Yeah.
and speaking up and saying, no, I'm not okay with this, or in general.
Hmm.
And I think that a lot of people have that problem where
Yeah.
they don't speak up because they either don't want to cause a problem, or they're not willing to put themselves first. And you have to learn how to put yourself first.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And I think nursing causes a lot of that too.
Oh, you're right. Because we're just trying to make people happy always.
Hmm.
It really does lend, once you get once you stop being a bedside nurse and become a nurse practitioner, and you get more into leadership roles, and you find out the ins and outs of how corporations work, and that sort of thing, and you're not just the person that gets handed down this decree and this is what you have to do and you just go with it because you need the job. Things are a little bit different when you know the behind the scenes.
Oh yeah.
So I'm very impressed with how you have taken this, this want for something to make you feel good, and also to make other people feel
Mhm.
better about themselves. And you're weaving in, even though you don't know that you're doing it every day, you are weaving in your nursing skills, your nurse practitioner skills, because you're triaging constantly. We all
Mhm.
do as nurses. You're triaging the situations and you're just like, okay, so this is going to work for me and this part won't. So we just move on from that and keep moving forward. So I'm very impressed and I can't wait to see all the cool stuff that you make. I'm going to make it a necessity for you to come back frequently on the show and talk more about all the cool stuff that you get into, especially Ren Fair time.
Mhm.
Down for that. I'm gonna come to Houston and go to Ren Fair
Oh,
sometime.
it's so much fun. We camp. They over the weekend we camp. We go to the fair, and then we come back and we have bonfire. And usually, without COVID going on, it's literally you're just walking around from campsite to campsite. There's like, people are just having parties. It's a fun time. It's like they did have it this year with very strict requirements. So, and it was nice because it gave a little bit of normacy to all of the crazy that was going
Oh yeah.
on.
So what kind of masks were people wearing?
The biggest, because it's all outside.
Yeah,
They were asking people to wear masks when they were walking around, but if you went into a shop, you had to wear a mask. They wouldn't. It was the rules, and so it was. From what I know, there was no real increase specifically from that. So they were pretty good. They had alcohol hand things everywhere. They were a lot of some places had stuff they were squirting your hands when you walked through. You weren't really allowed to touch this stuff this as much at this time. Like usually you could touch, but they were a little bit more controlled about it,
yeah.
which
But as a medical provider, don't you think that if most people wash their hands, we'd be way better off anyway?
well, that's part of why, I was reading an article about like flu was down 95% this year.
Sure, we've all been masked and washing our damn hands. Who
Yeah.
knew?
I mean, I've only had 3 positive flus the entire season.
I don't
So,
think I've seen. Oh well, no, I take that back. I've maybe seen two, but that's because they were already negative for COVID, and I didn't
COVID.
know what else to test them for. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like people just want to know that they're not going to die, and that's a big
Yeah.
deal for them.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm inclined to test them for whatever they want as they ask. I whatever, as long as you understand the ramifications of these testings. But past all that, when let's talk about if you were your 18-year-old self again. I like
Mhm.
to ask people this question. What would you have told your 18-year-old self about how you feel right now? Like,
Mm, I would have I would have said be more secure in who you are. Um, to a point, I definitely feel like, in your late teens and even in your 20s, you're still trying to find who you are as a person. You're not, I mean, you're physically an adult, but you don't know who you are.
right.
So I would have follow your instincts a lot better. And maybe given myself a little bit more, you can go to school. You can go to a nursing school if you wanted to. That's probably one of the few things I would have liked to have done earlier. I mean, I loved working in the OR, and it was a quick, easy way to get in and start making fairly decent money at that time.
Right.
But if I could redo it, I probably would have tried to go in a little bit, started earlier.
Yeah, I feel you on that. All the men that I had that I
Mhm.
allowed myself to get involved with and never finished school in the
Mhm.
beginning. Yeah, I get it. I get it. But I wouldn't trade it for anything, I guess, experience.
No.
That's how you learn things. So, but now your plans are to continue to be a nurse practitioner in the lovely Houston area, and also you're going to have this new company. And tell me again what it was called.
Royal Creations Leather.
Royal Creations.
No S. I keep saying this, but there's no S between
Royal Creation.
creation, leather.
Royal Creation Leather. I can't wait to see how phenomenal you do because honestly, I was impressed with you the first day I met you, and I like every time I talk to you, I'm just enthused and enthralled with the fact that, you know, you have all this knowledge about things that I have none, and I can't even dream of having. And so to be able to share this information with you, can you think of it's just the greatest thing, but can you think of any resources other than people just dialing up Robert and saying, "Hey buddy, what's going on?" Are there any resources that you can point people to that you know of that would be good for, let's say you want to get into a master slave pup alpha situation?
Yeah. So one of the there's called the Leather Archives, which is a museum of leather, the leather community, the start, everything that's in Chicago. They do have stuff online. The Leatherman's Bible, or Leatherman's Handbook. That is a book I read when I first started coming out into leather, because for me, going into leather was like almost another coming out, because it was a certain aspect of myself that I had always been interested in or was feeling but didn't understand.
Gotcha.
That's another one. The Leather Boys Handbook is another aspect that kind of gives more of a submissive points of view. Those are both books I read. But any type of organization that .coms I'm not the biggest fan of, because I think, it's, but org is always a pretty good option. But anything like that, the biggest one is learning about like consent and understanding certain, like, there's what's called the hanky code, which is older. People don't really use it, but different colors mean different things. And when people are like, I don't know which one I like or what I don't, and I'm like, learn the three colors of the stuff you like or that you think you want to know, and learn the three colors or the three things that you're like, I'm absolutely not going to be okay doing that. And then from there, you blossom out.
Okay. Awesome. Hey, let's talk about too. I know we were talking about this before the show. Let's talk about the old guard of leather. Were these guys who dressed up like policemen or Indians or
Uh-huh.
any other sort of group? Tell me about what you were talking about earlier.
So there is so back in the 60s and 70s, when kind of gay leather BDSM culture started,
Mhm.
in general, um, is what's called old guard. And that was a very structured, like a dom was there. Your sub, whatever that sub was, stood directly behind you to your left. Your leather pieces were earned. So someone gave you a leather piece. You didn't buy your first leather piece. And it was just a very structured mentality of, this is how it's done, you know. And there's some nuances and caveats with that, but generally there was very structure to everything. And that has really, honestly, since about the mid 2000s, so about 2005 2006 ish, there was already some movement away from it. But now, um, in the leather community, there's a lot of old guard. There's old guard, and then there's what's called new guard, but nobody really calls it new guard, where the old guard mentality is really not a functional mentality anymore. There are still some people, like I have some aspects of old guard that I still follow, but along with that, there is the change of acceptance with people of color, transgendered, women. And that has been, in the last 4 or 5 years, has really been just like in normal or muggle culture, is another one. Just,
Heteronormal cisgender
yeah,
people.
just like that, where transgendered, or you're getting a lot more like, we have to be more inclusive as a society. Leather's the same way. And it's still, there are a lot of times that people of color or transgender or women still feel very isolated or unwelcomed in certain environments. And it's, some people who have a very old guard mentality are like, no, there's nothing wrong, where a lot of people who don't, and that's a generalization, so I'm not saying
Sure,
all of that,
sure.
but a lot of younger people are like, no, we need to be more welcoming. We need to bring in, because leather as a whole, as a community, there's some aspects that are dying. There's not as much, a leather man was a leather man, and now, a leather man is that, and they may go and do drag the next day.
Right,
And some people don't believe that you can't be a leather man and do drag. And it's
right.
that mentality of the hetero male
Yeah.
philosophy. And that just is, like men are wearing corsets now. They'll wear a corset made out of leather. And I had to kind of rethink my own thing. I was like, at first I was like, okay, that's a little different. Like, I was like, not for me, but different. But then I'm like, you really had to think. I was like, whatever, I always have the philosophy, whatever you wear that makes you feel attractive and makes you feel like, okay, I'm ready to take on the world, do it.
Right.
And actually, corsets are one of the things I am trying to work on making now.
Yay. If you guys out there ever see my husband walking around in a leather corset, it'll because I made him do it, and he's gonna love it. I'm sure of it. We
There
might
are ones that are men that are like a single shoulder that comes over, almost like a steampunk mentality. So it's not quite as feminine-ish, but it's the world has changed, and the leather community is kind of, in certain aspects, being pulled, screaming and kicking. But the whole mentality of the old ideal of leather, that it's changing, and it's changing quickly. And just like when there's a lot of change, some people can't understand it and they get left behind.
Gotcha. But we have to belly up and move forward, right? We have to
Mhm.
make some decisions to let some really super cool people into our lives that we might not have known before. And that's why it's always been my favorite thing to give people information that they may not be privy to, because I have some really super cool friends. And I really, really appreciate you being here with me, Robert. Is there anything else out there that you want to talk about that you think, okay, I have this platform? Are there any people out there that you want to reach? What do you want to say?
I mean, first and foremost, learn a little bit or do some research about BDSM, leather, way to negotiate, way to do it in a safe manner, because more than anything, I want people to explore and do what they feel is going to help them love life as a whole and live the journey of life. My journey is a lot of kink and play and a geek and leather, but do it in a way that's safe. Go out into community and find the groups, the leather groups, the clubs. You may not want to join them, but a lot of them are going to give you some ability to get some networking and learn a little bit. So you're not jumping in the deep end and not learning how to swim.
Gotcha. Dipping a toe. We like to call it dipping a toe over here.
Yeah.
Oh, Robert, thank you so much for being here. And can you go ahead and do your social media shout out one more time? Just tell everybody where you're going to be.
Yeah. So along with that, Royal Creation Leather, the philosophy of it is creating your fantasy for all sizes,
Oh, I love
whatever that is. So at Royal Creation Leather, no S between the creation and leather. It's at Gmail for inquiries, Facebook, Instagram, and website will be coming soon.
Awesome. And just as a reminder to everybody out there, we are coming to you thanks to Just Some Podcast Media Group. Love those guys over there. And our friend Nurse Papa. I loved having you on the show, Robert. You're definitely coming back because we have much more things to talk about. You're so, you're giving me so many ideas just sitting here talking to you. And remember, you can find me at berrypleasures.com. You can find me at Berry Pleasures on Twitter. I am Pleasure Pathways on Facebook and Instagram. And, you know, Buried Pleasures podcast is on most of the podcasting platforms. So I just encourage you to listen to some more. Robert, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. You're such a lovely sweetheart. Thank you for coming
Thank
on
you.
here and allowing some information to flow from that wonderful mouth of yours.
Not what I usually hear.
No worries. You keep coming on. We'll keep talking. All
All
right.
right.
So, well, guys, everybody, have a good day. Bye.
Just Some Podcast Media.